Last night's episode of The Frontline Tonight detonated across the internet like a powder keg. What was supposed to be a tense but civil exchange between the show's host, progressive firebrand Ellis Black, and sitting U.S. President Donald J. Trump spiraled into one of the most explosive on-air confrontations the show has ever aired. Viewers were glued to their screens as veiled barbs gave way to full-blown character assassinations, and the evening became less of a political interview and more of a brutal clash of egos, ideologies, and reputations. The segment began predictably. Enough. Ellis, known for his cutting monologues and unapologetically leftist leanings, greeted President Trump with a forced smile and a quip about Mar-a-Lago's water pressure. Trump, undeterred, leaned into the microphone and smirked, calling Ellis the angriest guy on TV who still uses gel like it's 2003. The crowd chuckled, but the temperature in the room had already dropped 10 degrees. For the first 10 minutes, the interview stuck to expected terrain: immigration, the economy, the war in Eastern Europe. Trump delivered sound bites with the polished aggression of someone who's been behind the podium 1,000 times. Ellis volleyed back with the kind of self-assured snark that's made him a hero on progressive social media. But at the 13-minute mark, things took a turn that no one could have seen coming. Ellis leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, and said with disarming calm, "Mr. President, you've made quite the political career out of alienating communities you don't understand. First it was immigrants, then Muslims, then trans people. And last month, at the Conservative Youth Conference, you said, and I quote, 'I don't want drag queens anywhere near our kids unless they're the ones cleaning up after them.' Care to explain that? Or should we just call it what it is, transphobia dressed up as patriotism?" Trump's face tightened. He blinked once, twice, then leaned forward and tapped the edge of the desk with a finger. "That quote," he said, voice low, "was about keeping kids safe from sexualization. It wasn't about being anti-anyone. And I'll tell you what's disgusting. This idea that if you're not clapping like a trained seal for every activist agenda, suddenly you're the villain. That's lazy journalism and pathetic politics," Ellis pressed on. "What about your comments at the Tulsa rally? You said, again, your words, 'The black unemployment rate was never better until they started listening to BLM and stopped working?' That's not just offensive, that's racist. You were the president when George Floyd was murdered, and you turned that national tragedy into a punchline." Trump's eyes flashed. "You want to talk about race?" he snapped. "Let's talk about the Democratic Party using black communities for votes every 4 years and doing nothing between elections. You think I'm the problem? Look at Chicago, Ellis. You ever been to the South Side? Or are you too busy virtue signaling from your $5 million loft in Manhattan?" Gasps fluttered through the audience. Ellis's jaw clenched, but he grinned through it. "You just tried to deflect a charge of racism by blaming Democrats for systemic issues your own policies exacerbated. That's not debate, Mr. President. That's deflection with a side of Fox News." Trump didn't blink. "What you call deflection, I call facts. But I get it. You're used to controlling the narrative in this studio. But not tonight." The host chuckled darkly, resting his chin on his hand. "You still haven't addressed your record with the LGBTQ+ community. Bathroom bans, trans military bans, openly mocking pronouns. Do you think these people don't exist, or do you just not care?" Trump laughed. Actually laughed. "You're so desperate for a villain, Ellis, maybe you should look in the mirror. You sit there with your smug grin and pretend you're standing up for the little guy. But you're just another elitist profiting off outrage. Your ratings spike every time you say my name. You're not protecting anyone. You're exploiting them." The temperature was boiling now. The crowd wasn't laughing. They were caught between breathless silence and the instinct to start recording everything. Ellis wasn't letting it go. That's rich coming from a man who built an empire on fear, who turned politics into a circus and made marginalized people into punching bags. You've mocked disabled reporters, defended white supremacists, and now you're peddling this "I'm the real victim" nonsense? Come on. Trump leaned back, folding his arms. I've built buildings. I've created jobs. I've been on the cover of Time more times than you've had hot meals. You? You sit in a chair, insult people, and call it journalism. Ellis smirked. I don't pretend to be a builder, but at least I don't bulldoze the truth. Trump's expression shifted. His smile vanished. He leaned in just slightly, his voice dropping into a controlled, almost surgical tone. You want the truth? He said. The truth is, people, like you don't want a conversation. You want a public execution. You want someone to play the villain so you can play the savior. But you picked the wrong guy. I've survived real scandals, real attacks. You? You're just a YouTube clip, waiting to be canceled. And just like that, the entire studio went still. Ellis didn't blink. We'll see about that. Because after tonight, the world will see you for exactly what you are. The tension didn't break. It calcified. And just when it felt like the room might erupt, Ellis took out a manila folder from beneath the desk and slid it across the table. This, he said slowly, is from an off-the-record memo. You were heard saying that trans athletes are just men in wigs. You want to go ahead and deny that? Or should we play the audio? Trump's eyes narrowed to slits. He didn't move. He didn't speak, but the crowd knew. Everything was about to change. Ellis tapped the manila folder with his index finger, the same way a prosecutor might pause before dropping a smoking gun on the witness stand. The studio lights, typically soft and theatrical, now seemed harsh, like a spotlight cutting through the performative pretense of television. President Trump didn't flinch, but something shifted behind his eyes. Not panic, something colder. Calculating. Go ahead, Trump said finally, voice even. Play your little tape. Ellis raised a brow. So you don't deny it? I didn't say that, Trump replied. I said play it. Let's hear the full thing, not just your cherry-picked clip. Because we both know how your team likes to edit. A flicker of surprise registered on Ellis's face, but he masked it quickly. He snapped his fingers and a producer handed him a small tablet. With one click, he broadcast the audio to the studio speakers. The voice was unmistakably Trump's. Gravelly, off the cuff, dismissive. The recording played, "They're not women. They're just men in wigs. You let them in sports. What's next? Letting dogs compete with humans because they identify as people? It's a joke," gasps erupted. A few audience members audibly groaned. One person stood up and yelled, "Shame!" Trump didn't even blink. He waited for the noise to die down, then leaned toward the microphone with the steadiness of a man, used to surviving 1,000 political fires. You want context? He said calmly. That clip, those comments, were part of a larger conversation about fairness in women's sports. Not about hate, not about trans people being less than human. But of course you'll never play the 10 minutes before that, will you, Ellis? Ellis leaned back, smug, arms crossed. There's no context in which comparing trans people to dogs is defensible. And there it is, Trump said. You don't care about nuance. You don't care about truth. You just want a headline. You want to frame everything as black and white, because that's the only way you win. Ellis snapped. What nuance is there in dehumanizing people, Mr. President? What moral gray area are we talking about when you say something so vile? Trump's voice sharpened, his tone rising for the first time. I said it was a joke. You ever heard of those? Or is comedy illegal now unless it's directed at Christians, cops, or conservatives? The audience murmured. Some in agreement, others clearly uncomfortable. Ellis pressed harder. So now it's a joke? A joke about trans people not being real? A joke comparing them to animals? You think that's funny while trans kids are being attacked, bullied, legislated out of existence? Trump fired back. What I think is dangerous is pretending feelings are more important than facts. Men competing in women's sports is unfair. That's biology. And if we can't talk about it honestly, then we're just living in a fantasy. And your show is the leading fairy tale." Ellis's voice rose. "That fantasy line is how hate spreads. That's how people get hurt, Mr. President. And you know it." Trump leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You want to lecture me on hate? You, who sits here night after night calling half the country fascists because they don't clap hard enough for your agenda? You peddle division like it's oxygen." Ellis didn't back down. "There's a difference between division and accountability. Maybe you don't like being held accountable." Trump laughed again, but it was empty now. A sound of exhaustion, like he'd expected this war and was tired of fighting it. "You're not holding me accountable, Ellis. You're holding court on a fake stage with an audience that already agrees with you. This isn't journalism, it's performance." Ellis pounced. "Spoken like someone who knows what it's like to play president for 4 years." That landed. Trump's jaw clenched. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You're lucky you have cameras protecting you right now, because if this was a real debate, you'd be out of your depth in the first 5 minutes." Ellis didn't miss a beat. "Threats now? Is that where we're going?" "I'm not threatening you," Trump said, smiling tightly. "I'm exposing you. You want to drag me on national TV? Fine. But don't pretend you're doing it for the greater good. You're doing it because you like the ratings. You like being the guy who took on Trump." Ellis scoffed. "The only thing I'm trying to take down is the mountain of lies you keep climbing." The crowd roared, half cheering, half shouting in protest. The studio had turned into an ideological battleground. Even the camera operators looked uncertain whether to keep filming or duck behind their rigs. Trump raised his hand slightly, almost as if motioning for calm. "I came here tonight thinking maybe, just maybe, we could talk about real issues. Border security, China, inflation, things people care about. But no, you wanted a circus. You wanted a viral moment. Congratulations, Ellis. You got it." Ellis's voice was now steel. "You want to talk about real issues? Fine. Let's talk about why you gave tax cuts to billionaires while gutting healthcare protections. Let's talk about how you lied to the American people about COVID while hundreds of thousands died. Or how you tried to overturn an election because your ego couldn't handle reality." Trump exploded. "You want to talk about COVID? How about the Democrats calling me xenophobic for shutting down travel from China? How about Fauci flipping every other week while you clowns cheered him on like he was Moses coming down from the mountain?" Ellis stood. Trump stood. The audience was on the edge of chaos. Trump pointed across the desk. "You're a fraud. A smug, sanctimonious fraud. You don't care about truth, Ellis. You care about clout. You care about making people like you online." Ellis shouted over him. "And you care about nothing but power. You'd torch this country to stay relevant one more week." A beat. Silence. The two men, red-faced and breathing hard, stared each other down in a standoff that felt seconds from violence. Trump's voice was low now, controlled, lethal. "You can cut this however you want. Spin it however you need to. But deep down, you know exactly what this was. A setup. A hit job. And I played along because I thought maybe, just maybe, there was still a shred of honesty left in this broken media machine. But there isn't." Ellis tried to speak again, but Trump held up a hand. "You wanted your moment? You got it. But don't pretend you won. Because I'm walking out of here with my spine intact. You? You'll still be here next week pretending to care about the people you use as shields." And just like that, Trump turned to the crowd, jaw set, chest rising. "I'm done here." He didn't leave yet, but everyone in the studio, audience, crew, even Ellis, could feel it coming. Trump stood rigid, hands at his sides, not storming out quite yet, but his body language screamed departure. The tension in the air didn't crack. It thickened. It wrapped around the set like smoke, suffocating, inescapable. Every camera was locked on him. Every eye in the audience watched with a mix of dread and awe. No one dared speak. Ellis, still on his feet, seized the silence. "Walk out if you want, Mr. President. But the truth doesn't leave the room just because you do." Trump slowly turned back, lips curled into something halfway between a smirk and a sneer. "You think this is about truth?" he shot back. "You don't own the truth. You've turned it into a subscription model. Whatever sells, right?" Ellis raised a hand. "No, what I do is hold power accountable. What I do is shine light where most people are too afraid to look," Trump scoffed, stepping toward the host's desk. "You don't shine light. You flash spotlights in people's faces and scream when they don't flinch. You're not brave. You're just loud." The crowd was torn, some murmuring in agreement, others shaking their heads, but all riveted. They weren't just watching a talk show anymore. They were watching a battle of archetypes, the liberal crusader, the populist firebrand, and neither was backing down. Ellis jabbed a finger toward the folder still on the table. "That recording isn't doctored. Those words came from your mouth." Trump didn't even look at it. "And I stand by my words, not because I hate anyone, but because I refuse to lie. I refuse to pretend reality bends to your ideology. I said what I said, and if people are hurt by it, they should ask why they've built their identity around what I say instead of who they are." Ellis's voice dropped a notch, like a hammer just before it falls. "You keep saying it's about honesty, but your honesty doesn't come with responsibility. It comes with a wrecking ball. You don't build anything anymore. You destroy institutions, trust, people." Trump leaned on the desk now, close enough that Ellis could see the pores on his face. "Let me tell you something. Ellis, you and your little army of social justice warriors want everyone to walk on eggshells, to apologize for existing if they don't use the right hashtag. I'm not going to do it, and deep down, even your viewers respect that. They might hate me, but they know I mean what I say. You're too afraid to say what you really believe because you don't want to lose sponsorships." Ellis stepped forward. "You think I'm afraid? I invited you here knowing exactly what this would be. I stood here and said what millions of Americans are thinking, but don't have a platform to shout. I'm not afraid. I'm done being polite to people who push hate under the mask of free speech." Trump snapped back. "It's not hate to disagree, but it is tyranny to silence disagreement. And you've built a career on silencing people like me. Guess what? I'm still standing." Ellis pointed to the camera. "You're still standing because you've gamed the system. You hijacked a movement, hijacked fear, hijacked the presidency. But the reckoning is here. People are waking up." Trump rolled his eyes. "You mean your people are waking up? The rest of the country's been awake. You just don't listen to them unless they speak in hashtags and donate through Act Blue." A few laughs from the audience, unexpected ones. Trump caught it. So did Ellis. Ellis regrouped. "I listen to the people who've been unheard, marginalized, oppressed, the ones your policies left behind." Trump stood tall again, exhaling like someone brushing off static. "Let me break something down for you, Ellis. The reason people voted for me, still support me, is because I say what they can't. I say it loud, without checking if it's focus group approved. And no matter how many times you try to cancel me, they keep listening. You can't cancel what doesn't bow." The studio was humming now, alive with electric friction. The air felt radioactive. Ellis crossed his arms. "You're not a martyr, Donald. You're a man who mistook a microphone for a mirror. This show isn't your redemption arc. It's your reflection." And that, finally, was it. Trump took a long look around the studio, at the audience, some stunned, some nodding, all silent, at the cameras, at Ellis. He walked slowly to the front of the desk, then stopped. "You wanted me to snap," he said, almost quietly. You thought I'd yell, throw a tantrum, give you the viral moment, but that's not happening tonight. Ellis tilted his head. So you're walking away? Trump nodded once. I am. Because I don't need this. I don't need you. I agreed to come here because I thought you were worth debating. Turns out you're just another noise merchant with a hero complex. Ellis didn't reply. Trump looked to the crowd once more, then raised a single finger in the air and pointed to the camera. To anyone watching at home, he said, if you're tired of the circus, the outrage for profit media, and people like this guy pretending they speak for you, you're not alone. They want you silent. Stay loud. And with that, Donald J. Trump turned and walked off the set. No dramatic exit. No slamming doors. No security escort. Just the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heels against tile, receding into the distance. The camera lingered on Ellis, who stood, still, breathing hard. He turned to the camera but didn't speak. The moment was too raw, too volatile to spin. He simply sat back down, leaned into the desk, and stared into the lens as the outro music began to roll. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They sat in silence, digesting what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a talk show episode. It was a national moment. The commentary clips would flood online within the hour. Every side would claim victory. Memes would be made. Headlines would distort. But in that studio, in real time, no one walked away unchanged. Not the host, not the guest, not the audience, and certainly not the country watching.